chief epidemiologist and the chief antimicrobial steward. Really want to thank you all for coming out here, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but really my job is to sort of talk about the myths and talk about the safety of the vaccine as well. But let's start with coronavirus. What's going on with coronavirus? You know, around this time we expected, we had that peak, our third or fourth wave, or let's say our third wave, during the holiday season. We had a lot of coronavirus that was going on. We had Halloween, and then there was Thanksgiving, and then there was Hanukkah, and then there was Christmas, and then New Year's. So there was a lot. We had a spike in cases, and that, we thought that would come down, and it actually has come down since that time. But we seem to have plateaued. And so what is the reasons that are causing some of these things? Well, I think people are getting tired, right? There's coronavirus fatigue. I'm probably going to be looking at you the most because you're standing right in front of me, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to focus on you. Or you, sir. So there's a lot of coronavirus fatigue that's going on out there. We're tired of it, right? We want to go out, we want to go play. That's what we want to do. And then the vaccines, it's been a great thing for us. However, it's also been a cautionary tale because, remember, our three measures of keeping coronavirus in check up until this point was masking, social distancing, and washing our hands. When the vaccines came along, that was great. But then we seem to forget 1, 2, and 3. And so you can see, we're partying, we're getting together, we're going down to Florida, we're having spring break, we're going to Mexico and having spring break. And unfortunately, cases are rising. We're having gatherings inside, we're having dinners, we're having our potlucks, we're having all of these things. So, unfortunately, cases are rising. And that gives more importance to having the vaccine as one of our measures of protecting us. But I still want to make sure that we don't forget that we need to mask, that we need to socially distance, that we still need to wash our hands at this point. And so where are we with the vaccines? Well, I'm going to actually open up with some unusual news. You may have all heard about the temporary pause that is being recommended. Are you all familiar with this, with the J&J vaccine? This is late breaking news. So I'm going to actually open up with that. We still believe that vaccines are safe at this point. But what we are going to do is we're going to position ourselves at what the FDA, what the CDC, and what the DPH is going to recommend at this point. So if they say, keep going with this, we're going to keep going with this. If they say we're going to pause, then we're going to pause. But I still do believe in the overall safety and the efficacy of these vaccines. So let's talk about the vaccines. A lot of questions have come up about the vaccines in terms of percentages. Oh, Moderna is this percentage, Johnson & Johnson is this percentage effective, Pfizer is this percentage effective, AstraZeneca as well. I try not to look at the percentages because the point of this is to take coronavirus, which can be a deadly disease, and turn it into a normal disease. I don't know if you all knew, coronavirus has been circulating for centuries, possibly millennia. Those common colds that you used to get, probably 15% of them were coronaviruses. They're not just rhinoviruses, they're not just our echoviruses, Coxsackie viruses. It used to just cause part of the common colds. And, you know, thanks to masking, who hasn't gotten a common cold this year? I haven't gotten a common cold this year. I may end up wearing a mask forever anyways, just to hide this face regardless. But it also keeps me safe, keeps me protected. So coronavirus has been circulating. But sometimes it can change, and sometimes there are variants of the coronavirus that has come out. And so the purpose of this is to take now a deadly coronavirus strain and turn it into a normal cold again. And that's the purpose of the vaccine. Who cares about the numbers? The most important numbers that you need to know is that for the most part, vaccines will prevent hospitalizations and they do prevent death. And that's what matters. So who cares about the percentages? But we are almost 100% with both those two areas. Because if we get a cold, that is unfortunate. But, you know, we can all deal with the common cold. But we obviously can't deal with that, and we don't want to deal with hospitalizations as well. So that's where we are on the vaccines. I do believe in the safety. Like I said, there's unfortunate news with the Johnson & Johnson, but we will pivot as the DPH pivots, as the CDC pivots. We will definitely follow their guidelines, and we will not go off script when it comes to that. So that's kind of my introduction to the vaccines. You can do questions, or I can throw it out there to the audience. We have a series of questions here as well. So. Yes.
What made Johnson & Johnson happy with this? The small percentage of mostly women and of a certain age group. Why was it kind of taking a left-hand turn with the blood clot issue?
I think that's a great question. So I'll repeat the question: is what is going on with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that is causing these blood clots? Well, so this is a little bit different from maybe the AstraZeneca blood clots that we typically associated with this. So AstraZeneca may have had their share as well, but I'm not going to say that it took a left turn, because what we're going to get from the news is that all of a sudden Johnson & Johnson is causing millions of blood clots, and it's not. I don't want to say only 6, because it's very unfortunate that this happened to these 6, and you're absolutely right. Women ages 18 to 40, cerebral venous thrombosis. That is a very critical condition. It is unfortunate, and they still don't know why. They don't know why that they caused that. They don't know why AstraZeneca may have caused, I want to say, a couple hundred cases of clotting as well. They are both similar vaccines, but they cannot tie in this adenovirus vector into why this is causing it. So there's still a lot of science that needs to be unearthed on this. And it is, quote unquote, only 6, but it is 6 unfortunate cases at this point. I don't have a good answer for you.
So they're not stopping using it until further notice? I mean, they're not kind of pulling it back and just using the Moderna and Pfizer?
Well, so they are discussing it, absolutely. So the FDA is actually, they're having a report out at 10 o'clock. We ourselves will be attending that, and we will be following as well what their decision is. And that's what I'm saying. We're going to pivot. If the CDC, FDA says stop this, then we're going to stop. If they say continue because it is not as common, then we will continue, but with guarded caution as well. And we will have to have courageous, brave conversations with patient populations who still may want to get the J&J vaccine, but maybe hesitant. And that unfortunately talks to a lot of vaccine hesitancy. And I'm not going to lie, this isn't going to help with vaccine hesitancy. But a lot of the myths that are out there, that this is new technology, that we just came up with this. Why did we speed this up over the last year? A lot of this has been in development for over a decade at this point. But this is our first chance to roll it out. Not just adenovirus vector vaccines, but the mRNA vaccines as well. And the adenovirus vector vaccines have been used in other vaccines as well previously. So there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy out there, but we will proceed with caution. But we promise that there's no hidden mirrors here, that we're trying to guide people, make sure you get the vaccine no matter what. We want people to have an informed decision. Questions? Yes?
So right there, 1 mask or 2 masks?
Oh, 1 mask or 2 masks? That's a great question. So when the CDC released their statement, it had everything to do with not necessarily protecting how much gets through, but making the fit better. And so, sorry, I lost my microphone. Making the fit better. And so the whole purpose of the second mask was actually to make a better fit, not necessarily allowing less virus through the mask. And so because you can see, I got maybe a little bit of holes poking out here. And so the fit is not perfect for everybody. And that's why they recommended a second mask. Now, it was a very small study, and it really only had to do with cloth masks over masks such as this. It wasn't all masks. So I've actually seen people wearing 4 masks walking around. And, good for them. I hope they can read through all that, but really it's about the fit. And so you can see that some people will take it and then they'll tie a loop to make it better. And you can see I'm pulling it tighter. But that was the whole premise behind having 2 masks. Not necessarily the penetration, but to make the fit better.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
How long does the immunity last? Will it be like 6 months, a year, or do we need a booster shot later on?
That's a great question. Am I allowed to walk or? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So it wasn't short. So how does immunity last? Okay. So this is a new disease. And so what's going on with this is that we don't know how long immunity is going to last because it's a new disease. So they just released a great study that said, we know that we're going to have robust immunity for at least 6 months. Well, we're going to get the 6 months, and then we're going to say, oh, we have a new study that says it's going to be 9 months. We're going to get to 9 months, and then we're going to have something that says immunity is going to last for at least a year. I believe that we're going to have robust immunity for at least a year, if not longer. We know that with the other run-of-the-mill coronaviruses, that we probably have immunity up to at least a year. But with this vaccine, it could be even longer. But just because it's such a new disease, and we're still studying this, we're going to get repeated studies over time, as time goes on, that tells us that this immunity is going to last probably a little bit longer than we thought it would. So it could be a year, could be 2 years. Right now, because it is such a new disease, we're only at that 6-month point. We're going to say at least 6 months, which is fantastic. Yes?
So then in reference to that, so then after 6 months or whatever, are they going to come up with a booster?
Great question. So boosters, okay. So let's talk about viruses. Let's talk about viruses. You know, when the next asteroid hits us and we're all gone, viruses are going to remain. Because viruses and bacteria, fungi, they seem to rule the world at this point. So viruses, what they do is they mutate. And so there are millions of virions that are being produced. So you can imagine giving birth to a million babies. All those babies are going to be different. And ultimately, it depends, you know, if you believe in Darwinism, what's going to happen is those strongest viruses are going to predominate. And we're seeing that with some of the variants that are happening right now. We've heard about the British variant, and we shouldn't really refer to it as by the origin of the country anymore. But the B117, and then there's B351, and then the P1 that we hear about. And so these are just stronger viruses that are replicating better, they transmit better, they're a little bit better than the previous ones. The only reason that this press is coming out now is because we weren't really sequencing the viruses as strongly and as robustly as we were as opposed to a year ago. And so now we're just finding out more about these things. But to answer your question, are we going to need a booster? I think we're probably going to need a booster. I don't see how this is going to be any different from influenza, where we're kind of guessing at the vaccine and manufacturing this vaccine 6 months ahead of time. And so I definitely see us getting boosters. The question, and that ties in, you came together, you planned this together, huh? I bet you did that. And so it depends how long our immunity lasts. If we see that the immunity is waning, or that variants are happening that we may not have protection from our current vaccine, then yeah, I foresee boosters happening, absolutely. So yes, get ready for another jab in the arm, maybe in a year.
We have a question from Facebook. For the people that bought the Johnson & Johnson, should they be concerned about blood clots? I guess a lot of people on tour are thinking about the JJ vaccine. What should I be looking for? How do I know what the effect will be?
That's a great question. And so there's once you're aware of something, you're going to start looking for these symptoms, whether they're actually there or not. And so usually, I believe with the Johnson & Johnson, again, it was, and I have to be putting air quotes around this because it was only 6 cases, but it was 6 cases, and that really stinks. But they happened pretty early on. And so some of the things that they should probably be looking at, with regards to this is just simply headache, or maybe vision changes, or something that is not going right from the neck up. But that's usually within 14 days. And so that's maybe what you should be looking for with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But remember, millions of this have been given out. And so there are 6 cases. And so from a science perspective, this is an uncommon condition regardless of the vaccine, but it does happen. And so this condition actually happens in light of not even getting the vaccine at all. So what we have to look at is this vaccine related? And they're trying to say that because it is temporally related. They got the vaccine and this happened. Or is this unrelated to the vaccine and this just happened in general, because this does happen in the population as well. So that's what they're going to try to determine at this point. Okay? It could be true, unrelated, I guess is the saying. Yes?
How do they come up with a different name for the vaccines?
How did they come up with the different name for the vaccines? Well, I'm on the vaccine naming. No, actually, I'm not. I have no idea. There's a huge marketing thing right behind it, and so they're trying to come up with With what?
I don't mean the exact name for the vaccine, I mean the name for the virus.
Oh, the name of the virus. The coronavirus?
No, the B1B, the C.
Oh, it all has, so why is it a B117, B1351? So it all has to do with their lineage. So it's almost like a tree, and the mutation's based off of that lineage. So a lot of it is based off of that. Yes?
I saw on the news a few weeks back that they were working on a pill. Is that replacing the vaccine, or are they still trying to come up with a pill?
A pill with regards to what? In terms of to replace the vaccine?
It said they were working on a pill for the coronavirus.
Yeah. So I think you're referring to what we call injectable. So a lot of our medications that we use right now are injectable. So if you came into the hospital or you came into one of our outpatient centers and we gave you an injectable, that's to help treat the coronavirus. But I think what you're referring to is that, yes, they are definitely working on what they call oral therapy or a pill. Because how great would it be if you didn't have to come into the hospital or into the emergency room to get your medicine, and we can just say, hey, we're going to prescribe this for you, and then you don't need to come in. If you get worse, obviously come in, and we'll take care of it. But yes, that's definitely in development. That's been in development since probably since this coronavirus was identified. Sorry, I didn't mean to walk all the way over here and scare you. So.
She doesn't scare me.
Oh, I'm scared of her. Questions?
And how well does the vaccine
Okay. See, I can. Facebook can hear me. I'm so loud. Facebook can hear me. So.
How well does the vaccine protect against these variants? Do you know at this point?
So it depends on what vaccine. Did it go off again? Sorry.
Can you?
Yes, no.
I think it's, yeah, you have a loud enough.
All right. Yeah. See, one thing I've been told is I'm not quiet. So, all right. How does it protect against the variants? It depends on what vaccine. So there are some, like the 1351, that we may be worried about the protection of the vaccine, of all the vaccines. It depends, but it's all being studied. But right now, for example, the B117, we were worried about that it could be more infectious, that it could be more lethal. Well, it may not be as lethal as we thought it was, with recent studies coming out. It may be more infectious, but it may not be more lethal. But the vaccine, we know, will protect against that. And that seems right now to be the predominant variant. But I want to go back to what I said before. We're just studying the variants right now. Before the B117, there was another variant. We just didn't know what it was. And before that, there was another predominant variant. We just didn't know what it was. And so what we're seeing is that we're seeing these variants. We do know that most of the vaccines are protective against the predominant variant. We also don't want you to say that, oh my goodness, the B117 is the only one that's in Connecticut right now. There are plenty of other strains that are happening as well. But that's just the one that gets the most press. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
We have another question from Facebook. My mom had Guillain-Barré syndrome. She was told not to get the flu vaccine. She also not get the flu vaccine. She's 83 and old now.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So the question is, if you've had Guillain-Barré with another vaccine, should you get this vaccine? Well, I'll even take a step back and talk about influenza. There's good influenza data that says that you can probably get the influenza vaccine even if you've had Guillain-Barré before. That is actively being studied. But with regards to with the coronavirus vaccine, you should always talk to your provider. But in general, you can safely receive the coronavirus vaccine if you have had Guillain-Barré with another vaccine in the past.
And one question from our walkers. What can I do between the first and second shot? Are there any restrictions?
So there are no restrictions between the first and second shots, except don't get another shot. So don't make your second shot your third shot. So there are really no restrictions. You can do what you want. You get your first shot, go about what you want, go exercise all you want, go eat whatever you want. There's really no restrictions. There have been some press about Tylenol and Advil, whether you can take that. Yeah, I believe that you can, but there still needs to be studies with regards to that. If you don't need to take Tylenol or Advil, then don't take it. But if you feel like you need to, definitely, that's okay. But there are no restrictions between the first and second shots.
We have time for one more question. Any from
Yeah.
What's the difference between the Pfizer, Moderna 2 shots and JJ 1 shot only? Is it the larger dose for JJ or is it?
So that's a great question. So remember, they're all different. So I'm going to say, like, what's my analogy? The Pfizer is an apple, is a Gala apple, and then the Moderna is, let's say, a John Gold apple. I don't know if you all like John Golds, but I like Honeycrisp. Let's say Honeycrisp. No, because that makes me think that Moderna is my favorite. It's not. So let's say they're two different apples. So then we look at the J&J. That's kind of like a pear. So they're all kind of different at this point. It's not like the Johnson & Johnson is stronger or it's more. It's just a different vaccine. And the reason I didn't want to go into the percentages is because all of these were studied under different conditions. Some of these were studied worldwide. Some of these were studied more locally. And so it's a different patient population that you're studying with these vaccines. So you can't say all the results are equal. And so with regards to the differences, they're just different. It's not like the J&J is more. But they're actually looking at studies to see if you need a second dose of J&J as well. But right now they think one is enough to get enough robust immunity. What other questions? I can keep going. That's okay. Oh, herd immunity. Oh, I don't want to be a downer. Well, they're playing music for me now, so I think in the old proverbial, they would, Cain is coming to take me off. That's what's going to happen here. Yeah, exactly. I balanced it all. Herd immunity. I would love for herd immunity to happen, to be honest with you. But we have to get enough vaccine buy-in. If you look at the polls and what people are wanting to do, we're probably only getting 60% buy-in when it comes to vaccines. 60% is good, but it's not close to the herd immunity that we want. You factor in those who have gotten coronavirus, which also has some sort of element of herd immunity, but we're not close to the greater than 90% that I would like us to get with regards to herd immunity. So I don't want to be a downer, but we need everybody to buy into this vaccine for us to reach herd immunity and to be able to protect us. And that leads into the next question of, when can we get rid of these masks? Well, I talked about the guy who didn't get a cold this year. That was me, and that was wearing a mask. But right now, unfortunately, we are not recommending not getting rid of masks at this point. Transmission can still happen. We do see breakthrough cases, and so we are still recommending, until we can reach a point of safety and herd immunity, that people should be wearing masks at this point. I know we're tired of it. But people like me, it hides this face, so I'm good with it. But the rest of you, I'm sorry to say, but we do want to keep wearing those masks. What else?
I got both my shots and I didn't have any side effects. Does that mean that the vaccine didn't?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I got my first shot. So the question is about not getting any side effects from any of the vaccines. I got my first shot and I was laid out. I'm not going to lie. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can go through this again. So I was very nervous when I got my second shot. I didn't feel a thing. I didn't get arm soreness. I thought they were testing me, like they gave me water or saline or whatever. No, it doesn't mean that you're not protected. But so it goes back to the question of, if you develop more reactions, are you developing more immunity as a result? It's possible, but we still believe that second shot is still protected. And so I wouldn't worry if you didn't experience a single thing with that second shot. What else?
Any news to share about the vaccine program that came in under previously as like a pioneer release?
Yes.
They can reach
I do believe that it is safe for children, but again, we're not going to do anything until we are pivoted in that position to be able to release this to younger children. What she was talking about is there's some good data that you mount a good, robust immune response in ages 12 to 15. There are ongoing studies, even less than 12, as young as 6 months. I do believe that this vaccine will become available for children, but there's still a lot of safety data that needs to be sorted out, but that's some good preliminary data right now.
Any other questions?
Can we travel after the second shot? Can we travel in bus or a plane? Can we travel after the second shot?
Oh, travel. Okay, so that's a great question. So with regards to travel, so it's not necessarily the act of traveling that I worry about in terms of transmission. It's what we do when we travel, after we get there. So it's like, well, I don't mind flying to spring break, but when we're in spring break, masks are off, we're all partying, we're all drinking beer or whatever. Well, we're not all doing that, but I'm definitely not doing that. So it's not the act of travel, but it's what you do when you get there. And that goes back to my basic 4 principles: masking, social distancing, hand hygiene, and vaccines. You can travel, but make sure you do those things wherever you go. And that's what's important.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
Okay, last one. How long after positive COVID test can I get vaccinated?
Great question. So there's been conflicting information about this. Some people say 90 days, some people say immediately after. So the question was, if you've had a positive COVID test, when can you get the vaccine? What we are recommending is that your acute symptoms, not your chronic symptoms, but your acute symptoms from the COVID have gone away. You may still have a lingering cough, you may still feel a little tired, but as long as your acute symptoms have resolved, and then 10 days since your positive test, you can get your vaccine. And studies have shown that your COVID, if you unfortunately got COVID, is like your first shot. And so your first shot is like your second shot at that point. And so your second shot will end up being like your third shot. And so that's how you're building the immune system. Going back to, you asked about boosters. That's kind of like being our boosters. Any other questions? I'm here all night. No? No?
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. We're getting back to normalcy. I love seeing your faces. This is like the first non-hospital human contact I've had in a year and a couple months. So thank you for coming out. I applaud all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.